everybody, you're all welcome to our Love Live show. Invite everybody. Good to see everybody. Pasco, good to see you. You're all welcome. I'm still sharing. Yes. You're all welcome. We're still sharing the video, and when you come here, get to share, get to invite other people, and God is good. We are on today. And we are having our very best. Let me take off this. Woo! We are in the love mode. Good to see you. Our guest, our guest is already here in the house. So let me invite people first. Let me continue to share and invite other people before I have you on camera. So you're all welcome. Please share the videos. Ami Benda, it's good to see you, my dear friend. I'm also trying to share. I'm doing my show in the car today because I have people who are taking a nap, and we have a baby in the house who's sleeping, and I don't want to make noise. So yeah, we can have it here today. Woo! Kathy, how are you, my dear? Good to see you. Please share and invite others. It's an honor to have Pastor Steve, and we really, we are so privileged. We are so lucky to host him and to come speak to us. So if we get this chance, we want to invite other people to benefit from it. Let's have people benefit from this. You're all welcome. I'm trying to share, but my other phone's connection is so weak. But I'm gonna get it eventually. Zikulese, Kathy, thank you for coming on. Baite nabalala basigaddeyo abali mu biyumba, abayagala okwebaka batandise okusumagira. They can't sleep on this, so we're gonna have a very good mulamwa today to discuss. We're gonna have Pastor Steve walk us through how do we handle this? How do we handle the unfulfilled expectations? When we fall in love, we have something we are expecting. So, and if that thing is not fulfilled, what happens? What do we do? As I'm waiting to receive Pastor Steve, I was trying to see that I share this video, but my connection in the other phone is so weak. But Katha, you can help me share in the Ugandan community group, and as I get, eventually I will get my Wi-Fi, because I'm outside, so the other phone works on my Wi-Fi, but it's weaker. Chris Watro, good to see you. Zami Benda, it's good to see you. Please share in all the groups you can. We don't have all the time. We're just gonna get our guest is already here, but we're gonna utilize the time that we have and get into the discussion. Other people may watch the program later, and if you have a chance to invite somebody, please do. I was trying to use my other phone to invite and share, but my signal is so weak for the Wi-Fi on the other, but you can do that for me, Kathy. That's nice of you. Today's program and today's session, we're going to be talking about unfulfilled expectations on the Love Life show. Love Life show is all about talking about love life, relationships, marriage. What happened to the generation we live in today that we don't know how to live with other people that we think we love? What happened to having our relationships together? And if we don't get our relationships together, life is going to be hard, because life rotates about love. That's why I come out with love. Life rotates about God. We have to have God. We have to have love. We have to have money. And we have to know how to live in our society. That's why I come out with 4 different shows. But today we are going to discuss love. On Friday night, we discuss love. We talk about love relationships. How do we handle this? How do we manage this? How do we handle the unfulfilled expectations? Because I understand each one of us. Good to see you, Rudy. How are you, my dear? Kasenyi Kalikatya. Nange Kaliwano kankozeseza for a couple of weeks now. Naye kansubire that you're taking good care of yourself and you're doing better. What we're talking about is unfulfilled expectations when we get into a relationship. When you fall in love with a person you think you love, you have what you are expecting from them. Fena tuyina expectations byebyo byewali osuubira mu muntu. What you expect from a person byosuubira mu muntu bw'otandika okumwagala oba bw'omugamba nti n'omwagala. Bw'omugamba nti n'omwagala naye ayina byakusuubiramu. So what happens? Ebintu ebyo oba kiki ekibaawo, ebintu ebyo bye twasuubira mu muntu gwe twagala bwe tutabifuna. Omuntu wamusuubira okuba n'empisa naye n'akulaga empisa ndala. Omuntu wamusuubira okuba n'omukwano naye n'otuukayo nga tolina mukwano. Especially to us Christian community where we don't believe in cohabiting or first living together before we can say I do. And sometimes it's kind of tricky. We're gonna be real here, because we have faced those circumstances, those challenges where you get into a person and then you realize that whatever you expected them to be, they are not. Somebody can even pretend to be a Christian, and you realize once you get married to them that they are not. They don't even have any values for Christianity. And what happens? So this is a discussion that we want to hold. You can engage Pastor Steve in the comments. Let me have him. He's already here. Tetugenda kutwala budde bungi. Katumwanirize. Pastor Steve, you are adding, and when you see that adding, you in there. Hello, Pastor Steve.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you too.
The people are more than excited. I know that the people here, maybe you cannot see them on your side, but we have people who are excited to hear from you. And you're welcome. How have you been?
Been good.
Great.
Yeah, been good. God still loves me, and my wife still loves me. Everything's great.
That's the most important thing. When you have, I like that about you. I always tell people that Pastor Steve tells us that he doesn't care about the people that don't like him. His God still loves him, and he goes back to a wife who loves him.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm s- I'm so happy to have you for a guest, and I'm so happy. I call myself fortunate to call you my pastor.
Well,
When
it's
I
an honor.
when I moved to this great country and in the city that I live in, I prayed to God to show me a church and to give me a pastor. So you are an answer to the prayer that I prayed, and I thank God. I've I've been so privileged and blessed by your message, and you really inspire me. That's why sometimes when I bring you on a show, it's not just for the viewers, but it's for me too, as well. So
Oh,
you
great.
ministered to me. And last time, so many people came back in my inbox and told me how much they benefited and appreciated you sharing your life with them and your experience in marriage and relationships.
Yeah, well, it's a joy to be with you, and it really is a privilege to be your pastor. Yeah,
I'm so
you
humbled.
really are such a joy.
I'm so humbled. I show you off all over the world. I tell them, I don't care. Finally, I got a pastor.
Oh, that's great.
I'm
That's
so
great.
proud of you, Pastor Steve. And really God answers prayers. For those of you Christians here, especially from Africa, they really understand more when I say this because we are in a generation where the real true pastors are rare to find. And if you
Yeah,
get one, you found a treasure. And I really thank God for you because you really represent Christ to us, and you love people, you care about people, and you know, I'm so proud of you. Anyway, going to the
gosh,
program today, our topic that we really want to discuss, and it's a big topic, it's a big challenge, and we really need to know what what happens when our expectations in relationships are not fulfilled, because we go in love, in relationship, having expecting some from the other person expecting
right,
something from me, and sometimes we realize our expectations are not fulfilled, are not met.
yeah,
Uh, in the Christian community, we don't believe in living together before we get married. So you meet a person and you start living with them, expecting them to be what you think. And when you
right,
start living with them, you realize that they are not what you thought.
right. Yeah, I think it's important. I think you should really know a person before you marry them. That I recognize that that's not always the case, but I would really recommend that you really know a person closely for a good year, maybe, before marrying them. I just think it's helpful.
Mm,
Find out, get to know their families, find out how their family, what the dynamics in the family are, where their weak areas are, their strong areas, and watch how they interact within their own families. Because once you marry that person, from a Christian perspective, if you're going to live biblically, you're looking at this marriage being for the rest of your life. That
mm,
divorce is not really part of God's original plan, and so we're supposed to get married and make it work. And
yeah.
I've often told people, because inevitably when someone gets married and they come see me maybe a year or two later, and they'll talk about their struggles or their conflicts, and I'll tell
Mm,
them that marriage really, and I say this tongue in cheek. In other words, I say this kind of teasingly. It's a bit of a
mm,
joke, but I'll tell them, I says, marriage is almost like a dirty trick that God plays on you, because
yeah.
what marriage does, it causes you to have to deal with your stuff. It causes you to deal with your weaknesses, with your stubbornness, with your brokenness. And when you get married, all of those things come to the surface.
Wow.
And so marriage is one of the tools that God uses to get your attention, because we all aren't we all sinners? We all need a savior, right? You
Mm.
know, I mean, Jesus died for sinners. He didn't die for Christians. He died for sinners. And so as a Christian, we understand that we have a savior. We have a need of a savior, which,
Mm.
and the reason we have a need of a savior is because of the brokenness of sin in our lives. And that brokenness works against our marriages. And so we come to God, we even in our marriages, and we bring our problems and our brokenness and our struggles and our disagreements to him, because he's the savior. But God will use those marriages. God uses marriages to help make us more holy,
Mm.
to actually make us more whole. So often when people encounter struggles in a marriage, they just break up and go the other way. But God wants to use that marriage to heal you and to bring you closer to him. Because one of the big sin problems is self-centeredness. I mean, we are all self-centered. We love ourselves. Now, we may not like everything about ourselves, but we all as human beings, we're concerned about number one, ourselves. And
Mm.
God in marriage helps to break that. Marriage helps us to focus on the other person. It
Mm.
helps us to focus on our spouse, our children. And as we go through difficulties, it's a way that God pressurizes us to get us to turn to him and look for
Mm.
his grace and help in our lives.
Mm.
And so that's really important. So it's impossible to have a perfect marriage because there's no perfect people, you know,
It's impossible to have a perfect marriage.
because there's no perfect people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It would
So
take,
we should not expect to get exactly what we expect.
that's right. Now, expectations are good. I think that hope and faith and
Mm.
thinking, even positive things are, all of those things are good. But
Mm.
we must understand that we live in a broken world and that we are broken too. And
Mm.
so when we come into a marriage, one broken person is marrying another broken person.
Yeah.
And the healing process can be painful.
Wow.
So, and it is painful. I assure you, my wife and I have had we've caused each other a lot of pain just because we're people.
I
But
can imagine. Um, so how do people live with when they get they don't get what they expected? How do
yeah,
they still continue living together when I expected? There are some challenges that are real difficult, and
they
in
are.
this way, there are some principles that are fundamental for Christian or non-Christian, because we have a mixed following here, and we want to
Yeah.
help the entire community. We have
Okay.
Christians that believe in Jesus and prayer, and we have people who believe in different religions, and there are fundamentals that we can say, oh, you have to develop this kind of a character, or you have to live with this to be able to manage this. So how
Yeah.
do people live with uh, stay together, or work out an unfulfilled expectation if they don't get exactly what they expected? There are certain things
Right.
that you can live with, and
Yeah.
there are certain things that are very hard to live with.
Yeah. No, that's really true. It's really true. I think first of all, it really helps. I think that human nature is to always blame the other person. And that's exactly the opposite
Mm.
of the way we should think. That as long as we see the other person as being the problem or being the sinner, we will never be happy. We should always, Jesus told a little parable. He said, before you try to take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own eye. So, in other words, Jesus said, look at yourself first. That doesn't mean that we be self-centered, but it means that it's so easy to see the problems in the other person. But what we need to do is examine ourselves. Even the philosophers, the ancient philosophers said that the unexamined life is not worth living. So we need to examine our own hearts. And for instance, I came from a family that it was real easy in my family to point the finger at the other person. And I had the problems that I did. When I got married, I thought I was fine. And it's only after hurting my wife enough that she would begin to point back to me what I was doing to hurt her that I began to examine that. And because we got marriage counseling, that the marriage counselors were able to help me see that all of the problems were not Darlene's. Some of the problems were really mine. And so it helps with expectations. Now, let me say this, expectations are good. We should have expectations. I mean, that's a
Yes.
form of faith, isn't it? I mean, we're believing for the best. We're hoping for great things. But when we're human beings, sometimes things are broken, or maybe all the time things are broken. And if I will begin to fix myself first, because see, the more whole I am, the better I can love my wife and help her to be whole. Because see, she was broken, I was broken, but if I just keep pointing the finger at her and pointing out all of her problems, I never get fixed. So you take the finger and you turn it back this way, and you say, "Dear Lord, help me. Help me." And in that process of being humble and open to the possibility that I'm not a perfect human being, that I take care of my own problems, and you pray for your spouse. I would pray for Darlene. I says, "Oh, dear Lord, help her." you know, help her to be what she needs to be. Help her to be what I need her to be. But I can't fix my spouse. I can only fix myself. But the more whole I become, the more I can love her, and then it helps her to be more whole, and vice versa.
Wow.
So doesn't the Bible say love covers a multitude of sins?
Yes.
Love is how
How do
you
we
help
get to that place? That's actually something that's easily said, but
yeah.
in the reality, it's something that is hard to do, because in expectations we may have maybe psychological expectation, mental emotional expectation. You expect emotional support. You may get financial expectation. You
Yeah.
expect somebody to be relating with you in a certain way financially, and they don't. And maybe you have physical expectations. You expected somebody to function in a better way, and they don't. So we have to
Yeah.
just be real and approach these things the real way. Like, for example, of I may go financial, and then I may go physical. You may expect that when I get married to this person, we're gonna work out our finances, and we're gonna have to agree on our finances, or maybe spend our money together, or be open to each other financially. And uh, once you get to live with them, you realize that they are not willing to do that, and you
Right.
expected them to do that. And
Yeah.
how do you handle that? Now you are you are offering us counseling.
Yeah.
Another one, uh, you get married with somebody, now from a Christian perspective. I'm speaking now out of experience. And then physically, you expected them to function somewhere, and maybe somebody did not realize that they have a sexual problem, or they knew it, but they went ahead to marry you, and you get married. And then you go home, and somebody cannot function sexually, and even the doctor say they can't help it because of ABCD. And
Yeah.
how do people handle that? Because I've
Yeah.
I've known people close to me facing such challenges, and they have many answers, questions, but they don't have answers
Yeah.
to that. We need somebody who's been in a relationship for a long time, and who's gonna be real to us and tell us this is how it can work.
Yeah.
Handling that disappointment, or this unfulfilled expectations.
Right. Well, what ideally, now sometimes we're already married and you got to deal with what you have, but ideally, there should be premarital counseling so that you find out if you're in agreement about things like finances. That it's it's really good to go through some financial counseling where they give you tests and where they ask you questions. What are your financial visions? What are you hoping for? What are you looking for? And and it's important to work those out if you can. But sometimes we're already married, and maybe we felt like we made a mistake, and we're in the marriage and we're trying to make the best of it. What is helpful if you're already married is that you look at what you need to accomplish or what you want to accomplish, and rather than being angry at the other person or being dissatisfied, you find a way to think, okay, how can the Lord help us do this? Or how can the counselor help us do this? Or what do we need to do to make this better? And the thing we must remember about a marriage, no marriage is perfect.
Mm.
No marriage is perfect. No one has every expectation met. No one. And it's important. I think, once again, we're getting back to the selfish problem, that as long as our life is all about my own fulfillment, that we'll not find fulfillment. I think it's very important that we would recognize that life is about laying our life down for the other person.
Mm.
As long as it's like there are so many women in the world looking for love. It's the wrong perspective. What we need to be looking for is, how can I live a loving life? If I live a loving life, I am more apt to find love. But if my focus is on me being fulfilled, me finding all the love that I want, me finding some gorgeous man or woman who's going to meet all of my needs, that's the wrong perspective. That I believe the most loving people find love the easiest.
Oh,
If
really?
you really, I think if a person just goes around doing good and being good and loving everyone and treating everyone with respect, I think that person finds love more easily than the person who's just looking for love. Because if I'm looking for love, I'm not being very sacrificial. I'm being very self centered. We all want love. I mean, let's admit that. We all want love. But the way to find love is to give love. If you
Mm.
give love, You know, my wife and I have been married for 45 years next month. And
Wow.
I assure you, there were times where we weren't giving each other love, but but as one of us would make the commitment, I'm going to love you anyway, no matter what, that love begins to come back to you. I have noticed in the last several years that my wife has become more and more loving to me than ever before. You know what
Mm,
that does to me? It warms my heart so much that I
mm.
want to love her back. I want to love her back. And it's a wonderful thing. In the early years, my wife was not affectionate at all. I gave all of the affection. I just gave the affection. I touched her. I held her. I always grabbed her. I always was giving her my physical affection. Somewhere along the line, she started giving the affection back.
How do you? It's kind of a hard thing. I don't know how you do that when you're giving something and you don't receive it back for a given time, because we easily give up. When I'm affectionate and I give somebody affection and they don't show me that they appreciate it to give it back to me, I will eventually give up. And then we live a still kind of relationship. Like,
Yeah. Well,
that's,
always remember we have we we have we're supposed to love people, aren't we?
yes, we are.
Okay. So we have to decide where the bar is, where the standard is. If, for instance, for a Christian, the Bible tells us what love is. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous, love keeps no record of wrong, love is not rude, love uh, believes the best in the other person. So the standard of love that we're supposed to live is up here. So you give your affection, you give your love, you give your affection. But as a Christian, if the other person's not loving you back, are we supposed to then lower the standard? Or do we keep
No,
the standard?
but naturally it starts getting down because
Yeah,
we have that natural thing, unless you know and you are taught, like you're teaching us
right.
to just keep doing it, which is hard to keep doing something the other person is not like appreciating or realizing or recognizing.
Yeah. Well, you have to examine our motives then. Is our motive for loving them that we'll get something back? Of course, we want something back,
That's the
but
expectation.
yeah, that's the expectation. But if our motive for loving the other person is genuine, pure love, I will love them no matter what, right? It's hot. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm telling you, in 45 years of marriage, there have been moments where it's like, I don't feel like loving my wife. There have been moments, and I'm sure there have been moments for her that she did not feel like loving me. But because we have a higher commitment, our commitment is to love God with all of our heart, our soul, our mind, and our strength. We are committed to loving God with all we are. And I think that's where the power comes from. I honestly think that, in fact, I don't think you can love the way I'm talking about without God. Because the Bible says God first loved us,
Uh,
and then we love him back. And the Bible actually says that if we don't have God, we don't have love. In other words, that even though I want to help the non-believer, I want to help the non-believer. I do. And I know that some of your viewers are non-believers or they're in other religions, and I understand that. But honestly, the only power I have to really love my wife, no matter what, comes from God. I honestly
Maria,
don't. Yeah,
there is Maria here said, "Love, love me. I lost love." So Maria, I think you lost God.
yeah. Yeah, no,
We
that
have this general problem about love, and it's a place that we get in God, because we realize even religious leaders don't understand this concept, because those that are supposed to lead us and set the example for us as followers,
yeah,
they have not lived up to the standards of love, and they give up once they don't get what they expected. Now,
right.
being realistic and being Christian or non-Christian, if this is personal question, and please followers engage Pastor Steve. Pastor Steve is a qualified counselor, is a pastor, he has an experience and is professional, so engage Pastor Steve with questions that you have. Me, my personal question is, if I got involved with a man, being a Christian, I never had sex with a man before I married, and then I get involved with a man who doesn't function sexually, and in the course they get a bit of frustration, and one of us decides maybe to quit, or because that kind of frustration will lead to so many other things. So how do you
Yeah,
help such a relationship where somebody married somebody who doesn't function in bed,
yeah. Well, I have friends like that. You know, one of the
and they
things,
stay married?
yeah, they stay married. And it's, see, let me tell you, as wonderful as the romantic and the sexual aspect of a marriage are, that it cannot be the focal point of the relationship. I will tell you, most men would never get married without sex. I don't, now women are different, but most men would never get married without sex. But in a marriage, we are human beings, and sometimes there are problems that happen. Number one, I think a person needs to go to a doctor. I think they need to do what.
Yes. In this case, you go to the doctor, and the doctor maybe will say that since you have been taking this kind of a medication for a long time,
Yeah,
the chances are very slim that you ever get your election back, or it's gonna be impossible
yeah,
for you to have this. And this is a Christian couple, and they are married, and that's the unfulfilled expectation. Because when you get married, you got your honeymoon, you expect to have that pleasure,
yeah,
and I don't want to undermine it. That it keeps a marriage together, it keeps the
yeah,
bond. So if
yeah,
it doesn't happen, what would you do if you are in such a place, a position?
yeah. Let me say this. I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy, but I do think that love should win over every problem. I really do. And I don't know if I should say this publicly, but
It's
there.
okay. This world is public nowadays.
Okay. But let me say this. I think that if there's dysfunction in the sexual relationship, there are things you can do. I don't know that I want to go into details, but there are things you can do to help one another. You know, that for instance, if I I know a couple where the husband has no interest in sex. He just doesn't, even from a younger age. He just didn't
Yeah,
have,
this is a very crucial
yeah,
topic right now. There are
yeah,
people who are not even interested. They are not just that they are not able, and they are not interested. And this other part had expectation. They couldn't wait for the D-Day, and this other one is not, and it caused problems in relationships.
yeah. Well, Jessica, let me say this to you. Welcome to the world of men. That's what many men all over the world go through. They have a wife who's not interested in sex.
Oh
It's
wow.
it's a very common problem that men sometimes are oversexed and a lot of women are undersexed in the whole world. So you have men that want sex with their wife, but you have wives that really are not that interested. So now we're reversing the problem, and wives have to understand this is typical stuff of what men all over the world have had to go through, having unfulfilled relationships in their marriage. And I think, the two things that have to be said, number one, we cannot make sex an idol. We can't make sex an idol. But number two, there are ways, for instance, in a good marriage.
There is where, Pastor, let's go slow, because this is very critical. There is where I heard that to men, sex is a need.
Yeah.
For a man to function well, they have to have sex in a relationship. So
Right.
if it's a need, we are not making it an idol, but someone's expectations of their wives, even as their girls. I told you in my case, it was my man who was.
Yeah.
So how do we handle in reality, not just in theory, but in reality? How do people work out and live with others and keep going? Because some people cannot, especially this generation, they will go on to the next person. They don't care how much you have invested together.
Well, let me tell you, when two people love each other, they can find a way to make it work. I'm not minimizing the problem. I'm simply saying that, for instance, if one spouse is very sexual and the other one is not, the Bible actually says that for a wife, her body does not belong to herself, but it belongs to her husband, and vice versa. It says for the husband, his body does not belong to himself, but it belongs to his wife. And that the Bible tells us do not deprive one another. So in other words, we should be available physically for our spouse. Now, if there are physical problems that prevent that from happening, there are ways around it. In other words, there are many ways to give each other pleasure than just the actual sexual intercourse. Now, I don't talk about this kind of stuff at church because not everybody wants to hear about it. But
they die silently, Pastor. I'm telling you this for sure. They die silently. That's why they go and pay lots of money to the commercial counselors to fix this. If this was addressed in church, it would save them money and time and stress.
Yeah, I find the old women don't want to hear about it.
Help us, the young women. For us, we are ready.
Okay. I think that when two people love each other, there are things that we can do for one another to fulfill those needs. That sex is not just about, pardon me, a penis and a vagina. Sex is not just about that. That even for a healthy couple who have been making love together for 45 years, that it can become very dull if you don't care about one another. And so I learned there was a book I read years ago that was titled Sex Begins in the Kitchen. Sex begins in the kitchen, sex begins in the kitchen. In other words, good sex does not begin in the bedroom. Good sex starts with how we're treating with one another. That I will tell you, I almost never walk by my wife without
wish you can see the comments here.
Yeah, I almost never walk past my wife without giving her a little on the bottom, or putting my hands around her, or pulling on her ear. I mean, I touch her all the time. I'm just always touching her. And there's something about giving that love all the time, not just for sex, but when we give one another love all the time, your partner's ready. They are more ready for you than, see the problem, too many men ignore the wife all day long, and then they get in bed together and go, hey, baby, and she's not ready. And so sex is not just about sexual intercourse. It really has to do with the emotions of the heart, with taking the time to truly care for one another. A woman, I will tell you, a woman does not need sexual intercourse to actually have an orgasm.
Mm.
There's a way that she's treated emotionally and physically that honestly, sexual fulfillment can happen like that without sexual intercourse. So if a woman is married to a man that is not able to perform, then he needs to still be loving towards her. And if his needs cannot be met, hers can. I'm not saying this is easy, but if a person is truly loving and self-giving, you can bring fulfillment to your mate. And if a man or a woman does not know how, maybe they need to read up on it and find out how. I mean, with the internet these days, there are so many sources for how to love a woman or a man, or how to bring them to sexual fulfillment. Let's use the word orgasm. But
The,
I'll
the,
say
the,
that,
the generation now, yes, we realize that as idolized sex, like most people are saying here in the comment, that sex is the main point in a relationship. When you do not function, that means you cannot even uh, keep a relationship, period. And another
yeah,
guy who is, I think, from Britain, he says, come on, we can't do anything without sex.
yeah. Well, then he's sexually addicted. If sex is everything, he's a sex addict. Seriously.
So
Now,
a person
now
who is
I
that kind, if a woman does not fulfill that obligation to them, they will not stand it. So they will have that what we call unexpected, uh,
yeah,
unfulfilled expectations, because they
yeah,
expect them to function. And some people, especially like we said, this was not focusing on just the sexual area, but it came out as to be like the major part, but we have
right,
also other unfulfilled expectations in a relationship.
yeah,
As women, like you said, that we always low. It's very hard for men to women to be available all the time to fulfill a man's sexual needs. And I've had that. I thought it was an African mentality. I've had that before, where men say, especially in Africa, they say there's no woman who can satisfy a woman. That's why men go for an extra marital
yeah,
affair or second wife. Or there's no such a thing as that here, but I think it has. Sometimes men sneak out and cheat on their wives,
right,
and that's the case. They say my expectations were not fulfilled. My needs are not met 100%. And how do we live? I know that you're answering almost the same question over and over and over again, but
yeah,
I want us to be more like practical, and like
okay,
you're speaking to your son or your daughter
right,
who is having this challenge, and what would you tell them to be able to work out and stay there without having to endure? Because we
right,
we had that part of having to endure a relationship, especially in this millennial generation, to endure
right,
a relationship when you think you can get something better than what you got.
yeah. Well, here's the deal. If we think we can get something better, it means we're not doing a good job with the one we have. I honestly think the grass is not greener elsewhere. I don't think elsewhere is better. I think the key is that you make the one you have better. There's no doubt that their sexual needs are real, but no one gets all of their needs met perfectly. No one does.
Mm,
We have, and I, in a loving relationship, I'm talking about a man and a woman who both love each other dearly, that they find a way to work it out. Number
mm,
one, we talk. Like I said to my wife one time, And, and I'm not even saying that what I said to her was real, but it's how I felt. I said to her, sometimes I feel like a little boy asking for the candy. And my wife looked at me and she goes, really? And I said, yeah. And she says, have I ever turned you down? And I said, no. And she goes, well, then why do you feel this way? And I says, I don't know. I just feel like a little boy asking for the candy. And she told me, she goes, I will make sure you never feel that way again. And she did.
Wow.
She
What
turned
a wo-
something.
what a woman! Every man would like to have
Well,
such a woman.
that's right. But see, I was honest with her. I told her how I felt, and she loved me enough to come back and say, well, I will make sure you don't feel that way again.
Mm,
And but see, because we now I wasn't going like this to her. I wasn't telling her, you don't fulfill my sexual needs. I wasn't blaming her. I just was
mm,
being honest about how I felt.
mm,
And she responded just so well to that. But see, when two people love each other, they're going to talk. And that if a man needs more sexual relationship from his wife, he should tell her. And if a wife is feeling uh, used, taken advantage of, she should tell him. They should communicate. That communication is a real key to your marriage. That I need to express to my wife how I'm feeling and what my needs are. And she needs to express back. For instance, if I come home from work and my wife has been, say, like in our marriage, my wife has been working all day taking care of the kids, changing diapers, doing dishes, cooking the food, doing laundry, and then I come home from work and I just sit in front of the TV for 2 or 3, 4 hours at night while she continues to care for the kids, clean up the dishes, do all of the work in the house. And then I'm rested because I've just been relaxing. But she's too tired.
mm.
That's part of that's my fault. I can't expect her to work like a dog all day and all night and then be ready for me at night. That if I have sexual needs, I need to understand that she also has needs. If she's been working really hard all day and she just comes to bed and passes out dead asleep, that part of that may be my fault. And so if I'm wanting her to meet my sexual needs, I need to help meet some of her needs also.
Mm,
I have found if two people really love each other and really will communicate, that you find that those two people want to meet each other's needs. Even if let's say the man is sexually dysfunctional, there are ways that he can meet his wife's needs even in his sexual dysfunction. But so often what happens, a man feels shamed. He
mm.
feels embarrassed. And so he doesn't want anything to do with the sex because he feels humiliated already.
Yeah.
But see, he's being selfish when he does that. A man can meet a woman's needs even if he's sexual dysfunctional.
Mm.
He can. And so there needs to be an openness to communicate without being defensive, and actually lovingly talking through what my needs are and what my expectations are.
Thank you, Pastor, for that one. And I want to pause on that sexual area, and I want us to look into another general situation that some relationship has encountered, and some of them are living with it, and they really don't know how to manage and handle it. Uh, the fertility expectations. When you get into a relationship or into a marriage, most of the if not 100%, maybe 99% of the couples will expect to have children.
Yeah.
And they end up not getting what they expected. Sometimes
Right.
it's a problem from one side, or sometimes you both have an issue, or
Yeah.
maybe God made it that way. So, and you really don't get what you expected from a marriage, because most of the time when we get married, we are ready to get the fruit of the marriage. And how
Right.
do you help people who are living in it, or who will live in it? Because most of these messages, you may not need them now, but you may need them later. And if you knew, or you
Right.
had this before and you experience it, you know how to handle that.
Right. You're specifically asking about children?
Yes.
Okay.
If people expected to have children in a relationship and they never had children,
Right. My
how
wife
would
and I
they walk through that?
yeah. My wife and I never had children. So we are very familiar with this situation. No, number one, before you get married, we should be talking about children. We should be talking about what our expectations are, whether or not we want children, whether we want one or whether we want 10. I mean, we need to be talking about those things so that we are in agreement. But once we get married,
We have
and
to talk up
that's
front
right.
about these things so
Yep,
that we know if it doesn't work out, or somebody is just adoring children and they think, uh, sometimes we don't realize that we can't have children until we are married.
that's right. Like us, that we could not have children. In fact, my wife and I, we have two children that we adopted, both of them. And
Mm.
some people find they don't think they can adopt a stranger. But in our case, my wife and I had so much love inside of us that we wanted to give out that we adopted two children. We would have adopted more, but financially it was just prohibitive, and we could not afford to go to an adoption agency. We ended up adopting two children through private adoptions because we never had the money to do that. You know, I pastored a small church, and we just never seemed to have extra money to do things like that. But thank God that we ended up with two children that were wonderful. Now, we tried to adopt several children. In fact, because my wife is Filipino, we wanted to adopt children that looked like us, children that had some color to them. And so we tried to adopt children that were Korean, that were black. We tried to adopt several children, but they just didn't happen. But there are so many needy children in the world that there are children to. I know in the Philippines, there are so many single mothers in the Philippines because they're poor, and that often the father will not marry the pregnant mother because he can't afford it. And so you have all of these women in the Philippines with babies but no husbands.
Mm.
And often what they do in the Philippines, a family member will adopt that child because there's so many of them. And I think that in America, we make adoption so difficult that unless you have a lot of money, it is very difficult to adopt children. But I think that if you have it in your heart to love children, that you can, there are so many needy children that just need an auntie or an uncle or a grandma or a grandpa, just children that will be loved by somebody, even if you don't get to bring them into your home because you don't have the money to adopt them, that there are plenty of needy children around. Foster care. We had a family in our church one time who had 6 or 7 or 8 foster kids
Wow.
that they just had so much love in their heart that they would bring these children in and they would just love them and care for them.
Wow.
So if you want children, but you can't have children naturally, there are things to do. You you can adopt, You can be a big brother. In America, we have all kinds of programs like Big Brother or Big Sister, and you can give them as much time as you want. In many cases, you're just with them once or twice a month, but you can be with a needy child a lot more than that if you want it. And
Wow.
having children really is about love. And I will tell you, getting back to what I said earlier, that love is more about giving than receiving.
Mm.
Anybody anybody can sit around and go, I love me, love me. I want to be loved. I want to be loved. But it takes a bigger person to say, I'm not going to wait for that. I'm going to start giving love. And not only in romantic relationships, but also when it comes to children. Start giving love to children. We can do that, even if they are not your children. So people talk about wanting their own children, but if you can't have children, start
How?
giving love anyway.
Wow. And so for the couples that expected to have children and they never had their expectations fulfilled,
Yeah,
they shouldn't get into a place of frustration and breaking up. I've seen couples that break up,
yeah,
especially on most men. And I'm glad that you're speaking to the majority of men on this platform. I have more men than women. Most of the time, men don't really understand it or endure it when a wife cannot have children, especially the African men. They will go out and look for children because they don't feel the concept of adopting a child. It's not so typical in the African culture. Even as they
yeah,
adopt a child, the people who get the concept, the culture or the society will not look at it as their own children. Like here, if you adopt a child, is yours and yours forever.
yeah. It's your child, and everyone accepts them. Well, when we adopted our first baby, my wife's family, which is Filipino, that we adopted this baby, and many in the family were kind of waiting to
And
see
I can
how.
and I can see your baby online.
Yeah,
Your baby.
yeah, yeah. Oh my, yeah. So my daughter's online, huh?
No, your son.
Oh, my son's online. Hi, Daniel. Yeah, in fact, I'm talking about Daniel. When we first adopted Daniel, some members of the family didn't know how to act. So
Mhm.
they kind of stood back at first, but they took their
No.
cue, from us, from my
Mm.
wife and I. We were so in love with that little baby, Daniel, who apparently is online, you said,
Yes,
that
you told him.
that he was we were so in love with that little blonde-haired baby that we we he immediately was our baby. There was no different if we had delivered the baby out of my wife's womb than it
Mhm.
was us adopting him. So as soon as the rest of the family saw that we treated him like he really was our baby, because in our heart he was, because that's how we treated him, everybody else started treating him as our real baby.
Wow.
There, there was never any difference made in my family or in Darlene's family. Everybody just immediately understood that Daniel was really our baby, and he was treated that way. So it really comes from the parents. If you love that baby and you really do receive them as your own, it's that way in the kingdom of God.
Mm.
We aren't really God's children, but He adopts us into His
Mm.
family. He
Mm.
adopts these rotten, sinful, selfish people into His family and makes them His own, and we become really His children.
Wow.
It's that way when we adopt. We make them really our children. And Daniel and my daughter both would tell you they really do feel like they really are our kids, because
They
that's
are.
how we receive them. And my daughter,
Yeah.
and I mean, no one would ever think she's not ours, other than the fact, other than the fact that she doesn't look Filipino. So
she doesn't look. You are not Filipino. Your wife is Filipino, but you're not.
yeah, yeah, and so, but you know, it's funny with Daniel, especially when he was little, his Filipino grandparents would tell us, they go, your son's more Filipino than even some of our other grandkids who really are Filipino, because Mama raised him with some of the Filipino traits. You know, she used Filipino words. She fed him Filipino food and Asian food. And so when Daniel would use private words, he would use Filipino words, so that way Americans wouldn't understand what words he was using, because they were private words, you know, like bodily functions and things like that. And so Darlene's parents, who were Filipino, they got a really good kick, and they got a good laugh out of the fact that Daniel would act very Filipino when he was a
Wow.
little boy about some things, even though he was completely white, blonde hair, blue eyes, but he would have some Filipino traits. And and his Filipino grandparents really loved that about him. And
So
it
the
was fun.
final word you're giving to the couples or the couples to be that will have an unfulfilled expectation towards their fertility life and an expectation, or they can't have children, what would you what is the word that you can give them so that they relax on their expectations?
Well, I think number one, some cases are very difficult and are very hard, and maybe they cannot afford to adopt. But adoption is really a beautiful thing. You know, it's adoption's amazing. And I would encourage anyone, if you really have the capacity to love children, that to look into adoption. And not all adoptions are going to be expensive. You know, there are ways.
We
There
will
are,
come we will have to make a program about that and the entire experience of adoption and how do we connect with these people, just to get people who are believing that unfulfilled expectation to
yeah,
make them be aware that they can look into this and it's very possible, and you don't have that void of not having children in your house or in your life.
yeah. Well, you know, not having children and wanting them can be very painful. My
I know.
wife, my wife had many. It was 6 years that we wanted a baby before we got one, and
Mm,
she would cry. I mean, it was very painful. I was probably too self-centered at the time to really cry over it much, but she cried a lot. You know, she
mm.
really cried a lot. And when our pastor called us and said, would you guys like to adopt a baby? And I'll tell you, going to church helps. If you go to church, you
Mm,
have connections. You,
mm,
you know, if you're in church for many years, you will come across situations where there are women having babies who don't want the baby, or can't financially, or they're too young, that they want to give their baby up for adoption. If you
mm.
go to church, both of our babies came through church life. We had other pastors call us and say that we have a mother who's looking for a good couple to take her baby. And that's how we got both of our babies.
Wow.
That it is very painful. But if you want a baby, you need to begin to explore the options. You know, you
There's Vicky
you
here says, what about IVF? What is IVF? Fertility services? Is that what you mean, Vicky? We almost want to bring the program to the close, but before we bring the program to the close, we wanted to look at so many different areas where we have unfulfilled expectations or our expectations are not met. And we have
Yeah.
discussed about the sexual expectations and then the fertility expectation. And then we talked a little bit about financial expectations.
Yeah.
Because I realized myself that the person that we date is different from the person that we come to live with. Why?
Right.
Because we don't get to know them. And once you start living together, of course, reality is going to kick in and you realize that it's so different from the person you dated. And then you have
Right.
you have an expectation that are not
Yeah.
met.
Yeah.
So,
Can I jump in, Jessica?
mhm,
Life is not perfect.
yes.
And for a Christian, this is not even our home. It doesn't mean that we don't want joy and peace and fulfillment. We want those things, but we also must understand that we bring our lives to God, and we understand that we will not get everything we want in this life. But for the Christian, we aren't living only for this life. Yes, we do want fulfillment, but we cannot idolize fulfillment. You know, and it's difficult for me to say that because my life has been so fulfilling. But I understand, you know, and when I think about my life is so fulfilling, and yet for most people in the world, life is not that fulfilling. I
Yeah.
feel like I am such a blessed person, and that in some ways it's too easy for me to say that our life can't be about this life only. But I wonder if one of the reasons my life is so fulfilling is that my focus really is on God. My life is not about seeking fulfillment. My life is really focused on God. And because my life is focused there, I think fulfillment has come easy for me. I don't know if it's because I really do love God or because
Yeah.
I really do love my wife that that fulfillment just seems to have come easy for me. And and I know that my life looks easy, but I'm not a rich person. I'm not rich at all. In fact, I'm always having to think about how I'm going to take care of my family. I've always I've always had to think it through. How am I going to care for my family? But I really do believe that the secret to my life is that I'm focused on God, that I love God. I don't expect God to fulfill everything I want in my life. But for some reason, because I'm focused on God, it seems to bring fulfillment to me.
Yeah.
And that I'm not expecting my wife to fulfill all of my dreams. I don't expect her to do that. So I'm focused on God, and I'm more focused on giving my wife love than I am on having her fulfill all of my expectations. I
In
and
other
I think
words, in other words, you focus on love and take what you get.
that's right. That's right. You love God, you love your wife, you love those around you, and what comes back to you, you accept it. But
If
if
you
my
get
folk,
nothing, you live with it.
that's right. In other words, if I'm focused on me, I want to be fulfilled. It seems like the person that is desperate to be fulfilled never gets fulfilled. So why not surrender that?
Mm,
Surrender that to God. You know, and that's what Jesus said. Jesus says if you hang on your life, you'll lose it. But if you lay your life down, if you give your life away, then you find it.
mm,
And I don't know how that works perfectly in a life. I just know that my life is so so completely fulfilled? And the only answer I can give, it's not that I'm a great person. I'm not a great person. But somehow God brings fulfillment to me as I give my life away. When I'm with my kids, I always pay for my kids.
Mm.
And and I think my son may make more money than I do. But maybe not right at this moment because he's in transition with his job. But
Mm.
but even when my son was probably making more money than me, I still pay for my son when we go out to eat
Mm.
because it's my way of saying, I love you. I
You're the
want to
father.
care. Yeah, I'm the father. What's very interesting, though, there have been moments as my son has gotten older where he said, Dad, I'm paying. He just looks at me and he says, Dad, I'm paying.
Mm.
And, and then my son pays. And I've noticed with him over the years that he does that more and more. But yet as the father, I feel it's my love and my responsibility that I still want to care for my kids, even though they don't need me to do that anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
The other part that I wanted to conclude with was the faith part where people expect their loved ones or their mates to be maybe at the same page on their spiritual life and activity. And I had so many people tell me, "Oh, my husband doesn't want to go to church, and when I married him, he was a Christian. He he was going to church. Now this is not what I expect. This is not the person I married, and
Yeah.
I don't know what to do." And others say, "My wife goes more to church, especially in Africa. In America, you can't do that because you have to work. Goes to church day, morning, afternoon, evening, night, and I never find her home. She's always fasting. She never does ABCD for me." And how do people walk, especially in the Christian lane? I don't know about the Muslim and the Catholics, but the Christian part, uh, how do people walk out that and stay together when you didn't expect that person to behave that way in
Yeah.
the faith, and then they're behaving that way?
Yeah. Well, there's no way I can specifically answer every situation, but let me say this.
Yes.
But let me say this, that we often reap what we sow. In other words, we may think our motive was pure when we married that person, but often it wasn't. For instance, a woman will often marry a man out of desperation. She's just lonely. She's
Yeah,
lonely.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
the main thing. Yeah.
she's young and lonely, and she will convince herself that this is really a very godly man. And she will overlook the fact that he really isn't.
But there's no perfect man, you said, so
Well,
I'm gonna take what I get.
that's right. There's no perfect man, even as there's no perfect woman. But often in the world, because so many women are at a disadvantage financially, that a woman will marry a man out of desperation. But let's just take America for a moment. That a woman will convince herself that this man is more godly than he is. And she will think he went to church with me, so he must be a godly man. And and we will marry that man out of desperation rather than waiting for the right man. And she will marry him, and she's stuck with what she married. And and we've got to remember that our own motives often are not as pure as we think. And so we will marry the person, and we will see what we want to see. And then we get married and find out they're not what we thought they were because we only saw what we wanted to see. But it was clear who they were, but we chose not to see it.
In other words, we undermine or we ignore the red flags.
We do. And we marry them. Once we do that, though, God's will is that we make it work the best we can. And I really do believe that if we will pray and if we will love them, that it can make a change in their lives. That doesn't mean it will, but we did marry them. We chose to marry them. It was our decision. And so now that you're married, what God desires is that we would be a godly mate, and we would love them and we will serve them. That doesn't mean we enable them to take advantage of the situation. I do think that sometimes we have to address things in a marriage, and it's a challenge. But I tell couples all the time. I says, you married that person for who they are. It's not, you don't have the right now to try to change them. You married them the way they are. So why are you now trying to change them? Instead of trying to change them, why not just love them and pray for them and be content with what you have? You chose them. You chose that person.
Did not choose. For example, there is a scenario of a person who married a woman for a housewife, a reserved person, not a speaker. And as years goes by, somebody evolves and becomes a speaker or goes into media or becomes. There's one who told me when I became an artist, my husband freaked out on that and said, I never married an artist. I never married a musician. I'm not going to stand this. So
Yeah.
and they have a fit on that. And another one said, I never married a preacher. You're not going to spend the whole time going to preach and reading the Bible. So that's, it's kind of tricky to
Yeah.
I know, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Well, in our case, my wife is now a pastor and a preacher. I did not marry a pastor or a preacher.
How do you live with that?
But Darlene evolved. When I married Darlene, she was this very meek little Filipino lady who didn't say much. But as she began to evolve, as you say, and she began to grow, and there came a point in time where, see, I was very strong leader. And when we first married, I did all the leading. You know, we go out to a restaurant, I picked a restaurant. Somewhere along the way, Darlene quit being quiet. She began to mature as a person. She began to be more confident, especially in the Lord. And she began to speak up. But because I loved her, and I didn't realize how dominant I was. But because I really do love her, as she began to be stronger as a person, I don't mean rebellious, but I mean stronger as a person, that because I loved her, I was okay with her becoming a stronger person. And that doesn't mean I liked everything about it.
Talk about that. Because some people would say, I'm not getting to terms with this, even as she's determined to do that. And
right.
some even talk to me. And
well,
I'm like,
I think there's two sides to it. I think number one, I think rebellion is a real thing that happens in our hearts. And I think sometimes it is rebellion. But by the same token, I don't think it's right for a man to suppress his woman. I don't think it's right. I think that if my wife is growing as a person and becoming a newer person and developing newer interests, I think that if I'm going to love my wife, I need to be open to those things. That doesn't mean that I don't talk to her about my fears or my desires, but I need to be open to the fact that my wife is wanting to do new things. For instance, my wife, uh, maybe once a year, goes on a little weekend with a couple of other girlfriends. Now, I trust her. I trust her girlfriends, and they sometimes like will go to Canada for the weekend, and they will go out for high tea or afternoon tea, and they just want to go be together. But because I love her, I want her to be happy. And so I don't, as long as we can afford it, I don't have a problem with that. I trust the girls that she's going with, the ladies that she's going with. Now, if my wife was going out with a bunch of single women who I know were out drinking and chasing men, then yeah, I wouldn't be happy with that. And we would talk about it. But that's not what she's doing. My wife gets invited to do ministry uh, elsewhere, sometimes apart from me, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not jealous about that. I want my wife to be a strong, healthy person, and I have to accept the fact that she's growing and changing, even as I'm growing and changing. But
Wow.
that doesn't mean there's no rebellion in our hearts. We
Yeah.
still have we still have to guard against rebellion, and not only my wife, but for me too. We
Mm.
still have to guard against our own rebellious nature. But but with that being said, I want to trust my wife, and I want her to be happy, and I want her to be growing and fulfilled. See, fulfillment for me is not just for me.
Mm.
I I want my wife to be fulfilled. I want her to be happy. I want her to do the things that she wants to do. That fulfillment for me cannot be just about me.
Mm. That's
I
a whole topic together to discuss because I'm
Yeah.
realizing every time you share, I'm realizing another topic that we have to really discuss and go in details. Because I realize that if you love somebody, you're gonna have them let you're gonna let them be what they want to be and do what makes them happy because you want to see that they are happy.
Yeah.
And
See, but see, that's true, but that doesn't mean there are no boundaries. There are
mm,
boundaries, but the boundaries for my wife and I are God. God is our boundary. God's the one that tells us the parameters in which we live. God says,
mm,
live here, because if you live outside that, you will find destruction. You will
wow,
find sin and a lack of peace. See, God gives us our boundaries, but
wow.
inside those boundaries, we find our love and our fulfillment and our peace. See,
So,
we live in a world today that doesn't want boundaries.
oh yes, we don't.
Yeah,
That's a very sensitive uh, uh, topic to discuss, actually, uh,
yeah,
about boundaries, because I want to come to be married to somebody, and I don't want any boundary that govern or protect a marriage or keep a
yeah,
marriage together. And the other person wants to be married to me, and they don't want any boundaries. They say if you uh, creating those boundaries, then you're controlling me, and they're not gonna be happy about it, and
yeah.
then it's gonna bring a strain on a relationship.
Right. Now, human nature does want to control the other person, which is not good. But
So what is
what
the
God,
difference between a boundary and control? Because we confuse the two. I'm trying to put a boundary on how my husband is spending money, and we want to create a
right.
boundary in that, and
Yeah.
he thinks I'm controlling him.
Yeah. Well, God does give us boundaries, right?
Hmm.
God tells us what right and wrong is. So God gives us boundaries. The problem is we are a rebellious people. We don't want anyone to tell us what the boundaries are. We don't even want God to tell us what the boundaries are. I mean, we live in a world today where they don't want any boundaries at all. And our government, some cases, give them the right to not have those boundaries. But we must understand, if you're going to be in relationship with another person, there are boundaries. God gives us boundaries for our relationship with him. See, our world today is saying no boundaries, but God gives us boundaries. And when we get married, there are also boundaries, but they are boundaries of agreement. We should agree on those things before we get married. We, for instance, we have a boundary in our relationship that she's the only woman for me and I'm the only man for her. That's a boundary. Some people would call that control. But when I say that we should not be controlling each other in a marriage, I'm really saying that we should not be dominating one another. That I should not get in the way of my wife being what she is supposed to be. I should not dominate my wife in the sense of what she can do and can't do. But there should be boundaries in a relationship. That's different. Boundaries are very healthy. Even in child rearing, studies have been done, and the children that have very clear boundaries are happier than the children whose parents don't give them boundaries.
That's right.
The child who has no boundaries will not be secure. They will be rebellious. They will often be very angry. See, if a child is raised with no boundaries, that's what they get used to. And then they're very angry when anyone gets in their way. So a child needs boundaries. I think people need boundaries too.
And in a relationship, we need boundaries.
We need boundaries.
We're going to come back and talk about boundaries, because I was thinking about another critical element in relationship that we call space, and I think it goes into the boundaries, not getting into the other person's space and letting them be.
That's right. Well,
those are things that really make our relationship hard. And if we knew better and we knew what to expect and how to treat other in a relationship, because when I get into a relationship, I'm not getting myself into a prison or a jail that I can't be. I can't go and do a live video because my husband doesn't like it. That would be, getting into my space.
That's what I think. No. Well, an example of a boundary is that when you get married, you are kind of expecting your family to accept the person you're married to. But sometimes you have family members that don't like the person you're married, and they'll treat them very poorly. Well, in our marriage, we need to have a boundary that says we will not permit that. In other words, if I have a family member that doesn't like my wife and is going to treat her bad, I draw a boundary and I say, you will not be permitted to do that. If you are going to be doing that, you will not be welcome in our home. I will not let you abuse my wife. I will not let you do that. And so you draw a boundary.
Most men have to learn this, because I'm a victim of that, where a sister said to her brother that you're not marrying that girl, even as we had dated for years, and say, if you marry her, it will be over my dead body. And the guy could listen to that and take that. And now he's living a life of regretting, said, I was misled. Please. But we have to really set boundaries, and it's a very important subject that we need to get into, because people leave other people to control them if they don't build or establish boundaries.
Yeah, we should have boundaries in our lives. We should not let people abuse us. We should not. In marriage, there is a difference, though, between dominance and and boundaries. Boundaries are healthy guidelines that we come to agreement on. And domination is when I don't care about you. I want to dominate you. I want to control you. And that's evil. Control is evil.
We have to come up with that. We have to come back. Pastor Steve, you're such a gift to us, especially those of us who are following you from here. And I had my friend Renard. He said, I want to listen to Pastor Steve because Pastor Steve is going to make me a born-again man. Because he said, I wish you can stream live. And I saw him. People keep coming and they keep watching in the background. And we really appreciate you because I realized that you are so full. You have a lot to offer to the world. And why not us to receive if you can be available to really speak to us? And me personally, I'm always blessed. And I learned so much from your wisdom and your experience.
Well, thank you.
For the lessons that the Lord has taught you and you freely share with us. We really, really appreciate. We really, really appreciate.
Thank you, Jessica.
We learn to live a real life in reality and not live in denial. And what should we expect? And I like it when you tell us that we're not going to expect a perfect relationship. When we go to our charismatic churches, they will tell us that you're going to get somebody 100%. You're going to get what you want 100%. You know, we were raised that way, thinking that we're going to get what we want in church from God. And we want what we want. And if anything is less than what we wanted, we're going to drop it and go back to God and ask for something else.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. When you become a perfect person, then you will be perfectly happy. Until you're a perfect person, you will not be perfectly happy. So in this life, we can mature. We can grow in holiness. We can grow in our relationship with the Lord, and life will get better. But it will never be perfect here.
Wow.
So, and the Bible says contentment with godliness is great gain. Wow. So learning contentment as we grow in godliness with God is a big deal.
I know it is.
Yeah, rather than being jealous that you're not as rich as somebody else, learn to be content where we are. Even, most people of the world are poor. Most people are poor. But if we can learn contentment and if we grow in our relationship with God, that there's great gain to that. Wow. Great gain. Yeah, don't wish you had what other people have. Learn to be content and grow in God and let God take care of things.
Amen, amen, amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Steve, for
you're welcome.
Visiting us and sharing with us. And I hope you're ministering to this generation and you're ministering to the younger generation so that we can take up from you and the things that we really needed to know. There's so much that we did not know. Personally, there's so much that I did not know. You always think that you'll get what you want out of life, but I'm realizing it's not true. I will get God gives me, and God will perfect me to suit into that, what He has given me. He has to perfect me.
Well, the pressures of life are what perfect you. If there's no pressures, if there's no rub, if life is already perfect, we don't grow. We grow in the trials.
Right.
We really do grow in the trials.
Wow.
So
we have to bring the program to the close. It's been a pleasure and an honor to host you. And thank you again. We want to
You're welcome, Jessica.
Pastor Darlene too, to allow you and not control you.
I see her moving. I see her moving around, taking care of things as I talk to you.
Another wife will say, you're not gonna be on those Facebook stuff, and people take it light, but it's such an honor to have this platform where we can reach out to everybody from wherever they are, from the entire world. I see people from Australia, from United Kingdom, Europe, from Africa, from Asia. I see people from South Africa. It's such a great platform for us to create and be able to minister and share with others. And we really pray that the Lord will continue to bless you and bless your family and increase your knowledge so that we can benefit and give you a good and a long life so we can benefit more from you and the generation will benefit more from you.
Amen.
Pastor Steve.
Amen. Thank you, Jessica.
We hope that we have learned much to have our expectations. Our expectations are not going to be fulfilled all the time. So learn that. You just have to fit into what you get.
Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah, there's some things you can do and some things you can't do.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So God bless you. We got to
Okay.
bring this to a close.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Watching our Love Life show. That is the end of it today, and I really appreciate all of you for being here. We will continue with the program. We'll continue to having Pastor Steve whenever he's willing and available. He's such a father. He shares from the heart of a father, not just from any other preacher, but from a heart of a father. He's such a blessing. He will teach us the reality of life, that you're not going to get everything you want in life. You're going to take what you get and work with what you get. Ask God to give you love so that you can love the other person. Don't ask them for love. Ask God for you to have love. You give. You look for giving and loving on them. And so by what you invest in them, you'll be able to withdraw. They will eventually get to love you back and learn. We have learned how to live, manage the unfulfilled expectations sexually, financially, and fertility. We have talked about that sensitive part of fertility in a relationship. When we have talked about so much, and those of you who have come in late, please, you can go back and watch the video. It has been very important and helpful. So we pray that the Lord bless you, Pastor Steve. You can reach out to him and appreciate him. Banange teri yatagala kumwebaza bwoba benefiti nze mukumuweka inbox, just tomugamba bingi bitayamba, naye mugambe nti mbaddeko ku show, ompadde omukisa. Kizaamu omuntu amaanyi. Ewaffe time is money. Omuntu okuteekamu 2 hours nga bwe mmanyi abazungu kiba kinene nnyo to them. So you can reach out mu inbox ye n'omwebaza n'omugamba munnange otuwadde omukisa, tukusiima nnyo naye kimuzaamu amaanyi n'agamba nti I'm reaching out to the African community basically, though nga n'abazungu mbalaba babeerako kuno bangi, naye fe tuganyulwamu bwe tufuna ku variety ne tuwuliriza abazungu view yaabwe, naffe abaddugavu ne tulaba we tubadde tuwula, we tubadde tuweebuuka, biki bye twetaaga okutegeera so that we can live a balanced life, we can live a successful life, we can live accomplished life, a fulfilled life. That's all we need to get fulfilled. And we can get fulfilled when we know better. So with all that being said, I want to thank you for watching. Keep following us. Tomorrow we have the Business Mind Show. Please watch out for that. Those of you who are interested in business and you want to showcase, you want to share with us what you're doing, please join us tomorrow, same time. We will be talking business. So God bless you. Oh, bye-bye. I got to go back to work. Bye-bye.